Hi, kids. It's Mr. Idikovich. We're going to pick up where we left off last time. We left off on page 19, or actually page 18, from ancient Egypt, and we were talking about life after death. So, how the Egyptians felt about life after death. And this is where we start getting into talk about mummies and things like that. So, life after death. The pyramids weren't just buildings, they were tombs. The pharaoh was buried in each of the large pyramids. Smaller pyramids nearby held the bodies of family members, animals in the afterlife. Not all mummies were human. Egyptians sometimes made mummies of animals like this cat. Mummies of dogs, hawks, and even crocodiles have been discovered too. The body of a human or animal that has been dried and wrapped before burial is what we call a mummy. And then this caption reads, "Treasures from the tomb of Tutankhamun, or King Tut." Egyptians believed in a life after death. They wanted to make sure their dead relatives would have everything they might need in the afterlife, so they stocked their tombs with things like food, clothes, furniture, and jewelry. In other words, the Egyptians felt like people needed to bring stuff with them or they would not be comfortable in the afterlife. So that's why they had all these riches and all these things with them. Experts think that the first mummies were made by accident. Egyptians buried their dead in the desert. The hot, dry sand killed bacteria that caused the body to break down, so instead of rotting, the bodies dried out. Which is kind of gross to think about, but that's the science behind it. That's why it happens that way. It says this Egyptian mummy now lies in the National Archaeological Museum in Madrid, Spain. Weird but true. Not everyone was mummified. The process was so expensive that only the wealthy could afford to do it. So not everyone became mummies, only the kings and the pharaohs and the people who had enough money to spend on it. Going back to the story, the Egyptians believed that if a person's body was preserved, his or her soul would live forever. They studied these natural mummies. They learned how to make bodies last for centuries. This process is called mummification. So they didn't do it for any other reason than when they mummified people, they believed those people would live on in the afterlife forever. But if they also believed if the body is destroyed or breaks down and doesn't become mummified, then that person will not live on forever in the afterlife. That person will just pass on. Tomb talk. Preserved, protected from breaking down or rotting. So when you mummify a body or you mummify anything, you prevent it from breaking down, which again is kind of gross, but after someone dies, if their body isn't mummified, it just slowly starts to decay away, and eventually you're left with only a skeleton. And so they didn't want to be left with only a skeleton. They wanted to preserve the entire body as much as they could. To make a mummy, or making a mummy. To make a mummy, ancient Egyptians would insert a hook into the dead person's nose, pull out the brain, and throw it away. Then they removed the liver, stomach, intestines, and lungs. They sealed them in canopic jars. The heart was left in place. Next, they would pack the body with natron, a type of salt, to soak up moisture. The body was left for 40 days. Then the natron was removed from the dry body, and the body was filled with rags to shape it. Finally, the body was wrapped in thin layers of linen. Weird but true. Egyptians didn't think the brain was important. They thought the heart was the source of wisdom. And then underneath it says the lids of canopic jars were often decorated with heads. Again, the canopic jars are where they kept the body parts. Again, kind of gross, but that's what they did. And then Tomb Talk says canopic jars are special containers ancient Egyptians used to store the organs of the dead that were mummified, that is. After a person died, the Egyptians believed that he or she would travel to the next world and appear before the god Osiris. He was the judge of the dead. The person's heart would then be weighed on a golden scale. It was weighed against a feather called the feather of truth. If the heart weighed less than the feather, the person could live on forever in paradise. In this mural from King Tutankhamun's tomb, the god Osiris guides the pharaoh into the next world. The wolf-headed god Anubis weighs the heart. On the left, the demon Amut, with the crocodile head, waits to see if the heart is judged unworthy. If so, he will eat it. And if it's judged worthy, then that person would live on forever in the afterlife, according to what the Egyptians believed. The question or the joke says, what did King Tut say when he heard a bad joke? He said, it's Sphinx. This page is just some fun facts about ancient Egypt. 1, the Egyptians thought many animals were connected with the gods, from cats to cobras to crocodiles. 2, many ancient Egyptians shaved their heads. They did this to keep lice away and stay cool in the heat. They often wore wigs to cover their bald heads. 3, the Egyptians grew a lot of grain. Bread and porridge were the main meals of most people. 4, many mummies wore masks made to look like the faces of the dead. Sorry, that arrow keeps getting in my way. That way the dead person's spirit could find its body again. 5, of the 7 big important structures from history called the wonders of the ancient world, the Great Pyramid is the only one still standing. Interesting, I didn't even know that. And then last but not least, the Egyptians invented makeup. Both men and women wore it. They believed that wearing makeup gave them protection from the gods. So it wasn't just about looking nice or looking pretty, it was about being protected. Life in ancient Egypt. Gods and goddesses were important in the everyday lives of ancient Egyptians. The Egyptians believed in more than 2,000 of them. They had a god for everything from daily chores to a safe journey to the afterlife. Each one needed to be worshipped. Horus was the god of the sky. I think it's actually pronounced Horus. Was the god of the sky. Thoth was the god of writing and science. Bes protected Egyptian families from snakes and scorpions. This piece of jewelry shows the falcon-headed god, Horus. In each claw, he holds an ankh, the symbol of life. Up here it says the god Thoth had the head of an ibis, a type of bird that once lived in Egypt. And then down here, it says the Egyptians thought the god Bes above also scared away demons. Ancient Egyptians thought illness happened when the gods got angry. Doctors used spells to drive away demons, but they had medicine too. Some didn't work, like an eye cream that included bat blood, but other medicines did. Many medicines included honey, a natural germ killer. This painting of a doctor treating a patient's eye is more than 3,000 years old. From making mummies, Egyptians learned a lot about how the body worked. Egyptian doctors could stitch wounds, heal broken bones, and perform minor surgeries using blades. Last but not least, weird but true, the first known female doctor was an ancient Egyptian named Paset. I'm not sure how to pronounce that one. She practiced medicine when the Great Pyramids were built around 2500 BC. And I guess this is really last but not least the joke. What is a mummy's favorite kind of music? It's rap. Kids, I think we're going to be done there for today. There are, I think, a few more pages, but we'll go through those tomorrow. And then I'll see if I can find some videos or something too for you to watch. But we're going to stop here on page 30 because this is probably long enough for you. So hopefully you watched to completion and you learned a few things about the ancient Egyptians and what they believed in the afterlife, how to make monies, and some of the information they have on their gods and goddesses. And then the last thing we talked about was their types of medicine. But again, we'll continue this tomorrow. Thanks, kids. Bye.